All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is now 6:02. I'd like to welcome those of you that are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those that are watching via streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under the Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event of a disruption, in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We have all board members present and ready to proceed. Dr. Elder, will you please announce the meeting? Yes.
This meeting is constituted under the state of New Mexico. And has been announced in accordance with the open meetings resolution, and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Dr. Elder. Mrs. Goff, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, ma'am? Thank you. Mrs. Goff. Okay. Dr. Elder, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Madam President, no, there are not.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll stand for a motion for approval of the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda is present.
Mr. Bennett has made the motion to approve. Can I get a second?
Second.
I got a second by Mr. Vickers. Any discussion on items on the agenda? Not hearing any, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. Mr. Hedon, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And I too vote yes. Agenda is approved. I believe this is the area of approval. Public comment. Dr. Elder, do we have any members of the public that would like to address the board this evening?
It's not.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So the board welcomes public input and utilizes this portion of the agenda to listen to individuals who have requested to address the board regarding items on the agenda in accordance with the board policy. By your signature, I assume that Mrs. Heather Rindles and Mrs. Rowena Tarichas has read and understood the guidelines for addressing an item during the Los Lunas School Board meeting. You have agreed to make no slanderous public utterances and realize that your statements will become public record. You have agreed that you will not discuss personnel issues or issues relating to a specific student in the public, but instead will request convening of an executive session if you have such items to present. We would like that you come to the podium so that you can be heard and identify yourself for the record. Mrs. Rindles, we'll start with you. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Dr. Elder, President Garcia, and members of the board. For the record, my name is Heather Rindles, and I am here to speak in regard to the legislative leave policy. The question has been asked how having a school employee serving in public office helps a student in the classroom. I have not heard an answer to that question yet, so I'm hoping that I can offer the $28 million answer. Here are the benefits of having someone that has served on the front lines in education as a public official. That person can advocate for funding for school districts, which can serve many purposes, such as facility maintenance, the K-12 plus program, HB 130, classroom supplies, elementary literacy materials that align to the science of reading, House Bill 481, higher wages for teachers and support staff, which also helps with retainage, House Bill 127, funding for school resource officers, including supplies and infrastructure to keep our students and staff safe, transportation, technology, also known as digital equity, House Bill 401, free breakfast and lunch for students, Senate Bill 4, funding for at-risk students, House Bill 199, That person currently continues to foster a relationship between the local police, fire, and emergency service departments to prepare for a crisis that we hope will never happen. That person is also a direct line for school administrators and parents to ask questions about current legislation that affects our school district, which in turn affects our students. Just like with jury duty, a public official is serving the public. It's not known if the trial will take 1 week or 6 months, but a school employee who is serving as a juror continues to serve and gets paid leave. Whether it's Representative Baca or another school employee that decides to run for office in the future, it's important to have someone that can advocate for our school district as well as districts across the state. I think you would agree that based on the items that I mentioned, the return on investment more than pays for itself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Riddles. Thank you for your comments. Next, I have Mrs. Rowena Terechas. If you'll come forward, please. Terechas, excuse me.
I'm Rowena Terechas from Bosque Farms. Good evening, Dr. Elder, Madam President, members of the board. I'm here to talk about the adoption of the NMSBA that you all did at your last board meeting. I can't reference it. I can't see it. I can't find it. So it came up today, something of that a concern came up today. It was actually a letter from the district legal counsel in a quote where I could not reference it. It says, "It is the practice of the Los Lunas schools and their employees to delete text as received or very soon thereafter." The statement is a very real public concern. As I interpret this statement, a teacher, a coach, an administrator, a bus driver could easily engage in text messaging with a student or another staff member and could essentially delete all evidence. I tried to look up the policy website, but it's under construction. So I have no way to reference the policy that oversees employees' use of cellular devices, whether they're district or personal. This is the first I've ever heard of this. So if a student tells their parent that something had happened, your counsel has just basically said those texts are unavailable to be IPRA'd. This again, a statement from your legal counsel says text messages are not public record. By whose authority? Where is that written? I need to see this. All of my research has shown that this is a false statement. According to the former Attorney General Hector Balderas, according to New Mexico FOG, which is the Foundation of Open Government, says clearly on their website, text messages are public record. This is a prime example of the policy manual not being available to the public for reference. This is what I was talking about in my last public statement at your last meeting. I would like the public to have immediate access to the NMSBA policy manual in its entirety. I want to be able to reference the policy when I need it, such as today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so next item on the agenda, we're on 6, which is discussion regarding the New Mexico School Board Policy Manual. First of all, I would like to state for the record that Mr. Kennedy is not going to be present with us today. He had a personal emergency and was not able to attend. We had reserved time with him for tonight's meeting, and up until about early this afternoon, we found out that he would not be here today. So we don't have an introduction and an overview that we can provide to the board tonight with the direction of Mr. Kennedy. He did indicate that he would be willing to come to the board at our next meeting, which of course, we still have plenty of time to put that on the agenda if we decide to do that then, or if we want to wait till our first meeting in June. I'll leave that up to the board to maybe hash that out and see what you'd like to see. But he is not going to be present today. What you do have in front of you, gentlemen, though, is a document that Dr. Elder has produced, which was the direction she and I had a conversation as to how we might want to proceed in step-by-step, going through sections of the policy and how we're going to approve them. In a conversation again with Mr. Kennedy, he had recommended that at the bottom of the page, it has some kind of amended date or review date at the bottom of each section that we approve, so that it could be identified that the board has reviewed it, made adjustments to it if necessary, and of course, make that part of our policy manual for finalization. Also, we need to decide of what would be a good procedure. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to proceed for making changes, making updates, that kind of stuff. So I think what I'll like to start with first is maybe the next steps. Dr. Elder, if you want to cover what you're looking at, let the board then go into conversation or discussion about what they visualize. And then we can see if we can come to some happy medium as to how that might work.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. What you see in front of you is really just a draft and just some ideas to give us a starting place. Sometimes it's easier to start with something in front of you than go, I like this, I don't like that, and give feedback on something rather than starting with a blank piece of paper. So this is only an attempt to give us a starting place for discussion. So this process is designed to be over a month period. And I kind of picture that, month by month, we'll be working on each section of the policy manual as adopted. And so we'll need to do several different things. We know that board members will need to review the section and provide any feedback that they have. We need to provide opportunity for the community to review and provide feedback. We talked a couple meetings ago about offering a survey link for them to do that in. And we know that we need cabinet and staff to review the new policies and recommend anything that impacts their work in a negative way in terms of changes moving forward. So I've set out a timeline for this process that gives people responsible. So it gives a timeline for board members, for myself and our cabinet or administrative staff, for our district communications. And then it culminates in working with Mr. Kennedy to recommend any changes. I have gone through the policies as written, and some sections are significantly longer than others. Some will go pretty quickly. Others might take us more time. And so I think whatever plan we put in place, we need to be willing to be kind of fluid and give each section the time and attention that it deserves. But this is a sample of what a month by month would look like. So that by the first meeting in June, it would culminate in board discussion and possible action regarding final revisions or newly recommended policies into the existing policy manual.
And Dr. Elder, I also know that there was a conversation with you and Mr. Kennedy about why our policies aren't on the webpage today. Could you give us some comment as to why? Because it was all intent that it would be there and it's not. What happened?
So started to work on that the day after the meeting that the policies were approved. What we're waiting to get is policies in like web format that have just the policies without the regulations and the exhibits, because the board passes policy, regulation, and exhibit are examples, but regulation and exhibit are administrative in nature. And so we want to post just the policies. In addition, we're waiting to the index as well, so that our communications manager can have that index so that it's easy to find. I recognize that has put us in a difficult situation. We want to be able to have everything transparent and available to our community immediately. Unfortunately, we haven't. So I have been in contact with NMSBA today, most recently to try and accelerate that process. We do feel a great sense of urgency.
Did they give you any guidance of what, when, and where they think we can get this accomplished?
Not a specific date, but they assured me that they're working on it rapidly.
Okay, gentlemen, so I know you didn't have a lot of time to review this proposal by Dr. Elder, and it's just, again, as she stated, it's a working document. Does this look like something the board is willing to work within? What were some ideas that the board may have had? And I think we also need to go back to consideration as to one board member kind of overseeing this process so that the board, other board members know who to address, who to get their changes or recommendations for change to, and the dates that board member would like it done. I know we would be working in accordance with the superintendent. She'll be working with the cabinet to get their revisions or adaptions as we move forward. But I think I need one board member also to be that for ourselves, to forward that information to. So those are just a couple of concerns I wanted to raise. I'll turn it over to the rest of the board. What do you guys think?
Madam President.
Yes, sir.
So on you put a section at times where we can review the public, the staff. Are you gonna be able to put that on the website, these actual policies that we're looking at? I mean, just as we go, I mean, maybe not the whole thing, but if we're going from A to C, say, those will be on there so they can be viewed, and because apparently they're not there now, right?
Board meeting on the website, absolutely as soon as we can, so that they're all available to the public. What we'll then do is, like Mr. Kennedy, if we adopted the whole policy manual as is, that then we need to go through section by section.
And then our agenda will be reflective of what section we will be reviewing each month, so that the public is aware of the sections that we're talking about and the board members are aware of what we're talking about so they can do their review.
Right.
Okay.
Also, Madam President, I don't have a problem with the one board member being that one person go to, that was not 5 people talking at once. All of us give our information to that board member, and it's relayed through either legal and super.
Correct. I think that having one person to funnel our information through as board members. And then, of course, having that person, whoever we choose it to be, whoever wants to step up and take it, then would work with the superintendent and Mr. Kennedy to make sure that by the time it comes back to us, for the most part, we're all aware of what we're looking at and why.
Also, board members to also see what public and staff inputs are put in there, you know, we can also review them, so we don't say something someone's already said, and you know.
Well, one of the questions I had with Mr. Kennedy is how do we identify that within the policy? Is the board going to be a certain color? Is the public going to be a certain color code? Is it cabinet maybe, or superintendent that might have a certain color code? So that when we're looking at it, we might be able to all identify who's making these recommendations to the change. Or is it going to be just, these are the changes? I think the board will always have access to the public comment if we want it, and we should all have access to each other's when we meet for that board meeting. But again, I think that's the little blind spot that we need to decide so we can move forward. Right. Well, I would hope that would be my hope, that Dr. Elder is including not just the cabinet, but all the department directors and administrators.
Absolutely, Madam President, that's, and it says that the cabinet members with their teams, so that the people who are doing the work have input.
Okay.
On each team.
Did you have one question, Mr. Bowman? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Smith.
So I just have a few comments. So on this timeframe, and I agree that we need a starting point, and this one is really good. However, it seems to me that we skip the May 23rd board meeting. And that puts us into June for one section. And again, I want to reiterate, this is a lot of work. And I know that the NMSBA is working to get this so we can put it on our website, but that needs to be done sooner than later, because the majority of these policies that we've adopted affect our school community directly, our staff directly, and they need the ability to read the policies just as well as the public does, so they can have input. So I guess if I took a little time to look at this, I could come up with a more realistic impression of it, but I do think maybe it needs to be compressed a little bit. I like the fact that we're opening it up for public comment or whatever sections we're discussing for that next board meeting. However, 6 days seems kind of like a long time. I'm not saying that that's not what we decide that we want to do, but it seems like one. So if we could compress this sheet into right after a board meeting, then the next board meeting, not the next, if we're having two a month, but the next month league board meeting to have that section available by then, unless there's some drastic changes that the district is, that the district or the public or the board sees that we need to make to these particular policies. So we can get on that monthly schedule of at least attempting to approve a section at that time. So looking at this, the only thing I can see that can be compressed right offhand, and I'm sure there's other things, and I want to thank you for putting this together, is that part. And I'm sure that if anybody that's listening to this, if they say the public needs a week, they'll let me know as soon as this is over. But it seems to me like we need to compress this so we can get it into there. And also perhaps some of these sections are relatively small and some of these sections are relatively accurate. And I think we're not going to be able to tell which ones we can squeeze two into, but I believe we should have two sections that we're working at a time. And if we're only ready to approve one, we can approve that. If we're ready for two, we can approve both of them. But if we only get one done, that one will go on to the next agenda and we'll add another one. So there's always the possibility, without rushing through, that we're approving two sections at a time with all the input that we need. And I know it seems like a lot of work, and it seems like the board did this and they adopted all these policies, but I'm going to look at it in a different light. This is an opportunity for us to start with our policies and make them ours specifically. And they're statutorily correct. Let's make them as soon as correct, but let's make them fair. Let's take into consideration the 8,000 students. Let's take into consideration the hundreds and hundreds of staff members that we have. And let's take into consideration our public and our business sector when we make these policies. So they'll something we're truly proud of and that they work 100% for us. So I think that we can get this done if we work together, compress this a little bit and move forward. And I like the part where it's board members individually. This is our responsibility, and surely we've at least looked at the first two sections because we do have it. We have the entire manual. And again, I'd like to stress that we asked Mr. Kennedy to put us at the top of the list and get these on the website as soon as possible. I think that one of the things we need to consider, and this is to me very, very important, is when we start with a board policy, we're getting them when they're statutorily correct. But what I don't want to happen is for us to spend so much time and effort on our board policies that we neglect to see how they affect the handbook at Catherine Gallegos Elementary, because those have got to follow the district handbook and the board policies and the laws and everything else. So there's no opportunity for any misunderstanding or anything that might be observed to be, I view it as this way, or I view it as this way. These policies don't even say the exact same thing. So when we do this, we need to make sure we work in conjunction with you and your staff to make sure that those handbooks and the athletic handbooks and everything else, as far as dress codes and the rules that govern what we do at the schools are all the same, discipline, everything. The rules are what they're supposed to be, and the board policies reflect that, and the handbooks reflect that. So that's something that's very, very important. So that's another item that I have. Other than that, I don't have any other comments. But thank you for doing this.
If I could just jump in real quick, I'd just like to just add with what Board Member Smith said. All of us will have work here. Everybody's going to have a job. Everybody's going to have to review these policies. You're going to have to know what you want to see changed, what you're happy with, what you're not happy with, and you got to come to the table prepared for those conversations, so that if we're going to, turn to section A and we're going to go to page 25, and this is what we're concerned about, that we're ready to go with those types of changes and review. So I would ask that all board members please do their homework, because in order for this process to work, we are going to have to work together and hopefully not stall too much, because there are going to be policies and processes that are going to take longer than others. And then I also just want to add to the staff and to the cabinet and to principals and administration that's there. I know we sent everybody on a little loop here. Oh my gosh, all these new policies are brand new. What does that do to me now? And I've heard some concerns about that. So I just want to reiterate that we know that the policies that are currently adopted are legal, statutorily legal by the state of New Mexico and federal. That's what we know for sure. And that's something we could not have sat here and said before. So we know that now. And then second is that as a cabinet member, as a board, as an administrator, not a board, excuse me, as administrator in the district, and definitely through Dr. Elder, look at your part, look at what you live under, and bring to her attention red flags immediately. Because if there is a red flag that we need to know about, she can bring that to the board at any point, and it could be put on the board meeting immediately, could supersede whatever our agenda might say, because we want to address those red flags. But also understand that as the superintendent, I think she can make that call. I feel she can make that call as to what needs to be done so that we're within the bounds of our district. So I feel comfortable that that I know we shook everybody up, and I know this was a big process, and I know the board is undertaking a big job here, but I feel better knowing that our statutes right now are legal. As Mr. Smith said, I'm going to take the high road here and say, we got work to do. It's not perfect. It's not Las Unas's policies, but that's what we're going to do now, and we're going to make it right. So if there's any concern about a red flag, oh my God, what are we going to do? Bring it to Dr. Elder as superintendent, let interim superintendent, let her make some decisions that, of course, is what she's expected to do. So I don't know if you agree with me, Dr. Elder, but that's how I feel about that.
Well, Madam President, you're right, because in policy C 2200, it does state that the superintendent can make those adjustments to policy.
Right. So if that hopefully will calm anybody if there's any panics out there. And again, like I said, don't think for 1 minute we're not taking our role seriously as board. That's our job. That's what we need to do. We've just done this. Now we need to make it work for Las Unas schools. So I'm sorry, I took over again. Mr. Smith was done on this end. Board members, any comments you want to make on this end? What works or doesn't work with this procedure?
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as far as timelines and compressing things, I'm looking at the fifth line down where it says cabinet members review with impacted staff from the 10th to the 15th. Why can't they start that review on the 3rd, just like the board? The policies on the web, they can look at it, let them start that process. Why wait? So that in itself compresses the timeline somewhat. And so there's a couple of things like that can compress it. One thing I need to add, so we have down the bottom review and evaluation update that the board president, the policy chair, and the superintendent. Some proposed updates to the board president, policy chair, and superintendent. Distribute proposed updates to the board packet. New proposals and preparation for discussion action, and then the whole board will be asked to act on them after approximately a month. So what does that look like? Doing it section by section. Because I noticed here, we're doing section A in this agenda, but it's not an action item. So when does it become an action item? You know, at what point? Or is it all sort of proposed and approved pending approval of the entire thing? The answer is what? How's that gonna look?
Mr. Vickers, I'm gonna say what I visualize, but of course I do want to hear from what staff also thinks might work here is it goes on to the next month's agenda for approval if it's ready to go. So that we're gonna have tonight, you see that we're addressing review section A. We can review it tonight, but there's not more public. Haven't gotten the policies up online, so we don't have that process today, move forward today. So unless I misspoke, I would think that, you know, we can review it today, we talked about procedure today, but we're not gonna look at approving anything today. But when you get your June agenda should have an opportunity for us to vote on whatever policies have been reviewed and accepted. Another option would be I can make a line item at our regular board meeting. We can put policy in that one and maybe that would get us through the faster policies or the easier ones a little quicker. If we did that at the second meeting of the month. Policy approvals. It's just a suggestion, I don't know, but the reason it doesn't say it tonight is because we weren't gonna vote on anything. But it would show up on the next day.
So on this timeline. There will be action on section policy is in six.
As of right now, following this, yes.
And I'm assuming that there would still be discussion, there would still be possible amendments proposed by board members. That one.
My answer to that would be yes. I don't want to ever put us in a situation where we run something through. If there's a board member who still would like to see something changed, we can change it. We go to motions, go to votes, and then it either passes or doesn't pass. But I think that the point would be to try to get everybody's concerns covered, at least in discussion at the very end.
So, that could be an issue of regular. Looking at the exhibit, consists of things like forms that people have to fill out. So where will those appear on the website? An issue and their full. So, where do you find form?
Thank you, Dr. Elder. could you answer
Sure, Madam President, Board Member Vickers. Right now, forms are available on the website, in some cases. So what we will have to do, and we're building a new website, in the fall as well, is have it be very clear that there's an alignment between, here's the policy, here's the procedure, and here's the forms. And so we'll need to have separate sections for those. Right now, we have a section for policies, but we don't have the procedures and the forms all in the same place. So we will work on that alignment as we're designing the new website.
Okay. So all of this will be available to the public. You can look at the regulation, everything. But the parts we are approving to follow the regulation and those things are your implementation of the policy.
That is how Mr. Kennedy described it. Yes.
Okay, and so, yeah, and it's concerning that Mr. Kennedy is not available again. Seems like this has been repeating. And, you know, he has personal issues that are going on. But we're paying for this service. We can get involved. So, that comes at the end of the meeting, but I would certainly like to try to do this item number 6 again next Tuesday, if he's available, so that we can at least get through, you know, all these steps and give recommendations on how we proceed. There's the issue of procedures for urgent policy related matters. There's several that have come up that we need to be sure are they're in policy. So I would certainly like to press the issue and see if he can be available for next week.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Mr. Edon, anything? Were you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Earl, thank you for this. It's a good template for us to start with. So we have from May the 3rd to the 10th for us to review it and do what we need to do. But you mentioned you want cabinet to start before the 10th date. What if we have something totally opposite of what they're doing? Would it be better if we completed with our stuff first, then?
I don't see why the parallel. Of course, they do not have access to the policy. Well, we probably did, but we get it just as we got it. But this seems like we go parallel. We're doing our input, our suggestions. We're going to be able to see their input, their suggestions, and then we're going to come to a point where we meld all that together.
Yeah, I get that part, and I'm all for them jumping in. But I'd like to see them jump in after us. In case we're way off base on something. So when do we meet together with the after the board, we do our work May 3rd to 10th. They start the 10th. On this template,
The week of the fifteenth and nineteenth, is that what this would look like?
Yeah, I think so. That would probably, the week of the fifteenth to the nineteenth would be where, you look at all the comments, the board, the public, the cabinets together.
Okay.
And look for, where everybody agrees and.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
I see that now. I have no problem with this template. I'll get busy.
Gentlemen, what do you think about adding in the second meeting date? Do you think there's any necessity for that? This form you have in front of you is just our start point. As we start rolling through, do you think we need to add any policy consideration at what would be our regular meeting, or just keep everything at this policy? Well, in this calendar, it would be plugged in sometime between the 19th and 26th, because that's when we have our next board meeting. But that's not going to be true, because this is our first review, right? But it would come in then for our June board meeting, regular board meeting, which I don't have that date in front of me right now, but it's just allowing me to put a bullet on the regular board meeting to address policy, if we needed to. If you don't think we need to, I don't know, Mr. Smith. What do you think about that? I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, so my thought is, you don't want to get going every 2 weeks with a section, obviously. And when I talked about doing 2 sections during this period, always ending in a board meeting, I guess I should have clarified that. It's imperative that we do a section following the steps that we agree on. And then once that section's done, if we were given 2 sections, we can start on the second section. Instead of trying to do section A and B, board members provide feedback, send work feedback to this person, do a section, then do another one. If you get them both done and we're all done, then we'll talk about approving both of those. That's one of the things. The second thing is that according to the agenda, I'm glad it's not an action item, because we're not in a position to even talk about section A, because I haven't gotten any input from you about what this section is telling you you're supposed to be doing. So we're not near there. Plus, it's not available to any staff or to the public. But somebody mentioned that it could be available to the staff and they could get it just the way that we did. Well, if that's the case, then we need to make it available to the public and they can get it just the way we did. So we're in no position to approve anything. I don't think that we need to do 2 meetings if we're going to do it like this and stick to the time frame. But if you have done your part where it says board members individually, nothing prevents you from going to the next section. Nothing at all. You know, you don't get to take the rest of the month off because you finished section A. Just keep going and then be prepared for each individual meeting should we have 2 sections come up. And that will be on us. So other than that, I having Mr. Kennedy here to go over items A, B, C, and D, it probably would have been nice. I mean, if he would have showed up. But again, I'm going to reiterate, I don't think Mr. Kennedy needs to be here for this process, except where it says his name in the process. But we don't need him here for our board meetings when we're approving goals. Again, that's on us. That's our job. But when it comes to Mr. Kennedy, board president, board policy chair, interim superintendent doing the review part, absolutely. Everything that says Mr. Kennedy, by all means, be a part of that. But as far as every time we meet and every single section, I don't agree with that. And yes, we are, if we have questions, we're going to ask it. And it is true, we are paying for that service. But if that would be the case, we would just give all the feedback to him and let him write them for us. But this is us. So I don't think that he needs to be here when we do these. As far as I think we have good steps forward. And that's one of the agenda items. Discuss what we're going to do next and discuss section A, which in my opinion, we're not ready to make any recommendations for. So that's again, my number 2 cents.
Just get 2 gentlemen, in conversation with Mr. Kennedy before we knew he wasn't gonna be here tonight, he really is open to how we want to do it. He's not gonna tell us how to do it. He's gonna guide us if we want to do that, but said more than once, and we all know more than once, that's our job. So the process that we use is our process. What do we want to do? What I liked about the service is having him put all that together for us and giving us that proposal to have at the meeting. So we have a final look of what it would look like if we vote on it. So if that's anything, I think that's a big part, but I think that's where we use him.
Exactly. And when he's reviewing our responses, he's gonna come. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Good.
You're still good? Okay. So, I guess the question would be, that was raised, is the review by the cabinet versus the review by the board. So in looking at what you had here, Dr. Elder, and just maybe for clarification, when we submit what our comments are to the board president or the policy chair on May 11th, then the cabinet would review what our suggestions are after the fact, or are they free to start reviewing it right away? How did you want to see that go through?
Madam Chair, in a normal month, we could start at the same time. This being May and an extremely busy time for our cabinet and our staff. I was trying to give them a little bit of wiggle room so that they start a little bit later. With all of the events coming up in May, it's just an extremely busy time. And so I recognize that our staff has extremely demanding full-time jobs normally, and that this is another layer for them. So I was just trying to give them a little bit of extra time.
So technically they would start reviewing their sections as soon as they were able to do so,
As soon as they're able to do so.
but to be prepared for that comment part by the middle of the month, which isn't happening now in May, guys, because we're gonna start the review process, but I don't know where we're gonna have the forms up and the dates that we're gonna have the forms up and stuff like that.
That might be a little bit variable this
Right.
first time.
Okay, any further discussion? Otherwise, I would like to say that this isn't requiring a vote, gentlemen, but is the consensus of the board that we would follow this process, or do you want to do it as a vote?
Well, Madam President, are we still are we gonna do, discuss D in this?
Good question. Dr. Elder, we wanted to discuss urgent policy related matters. Do you want to, would that follow your calendar somehow if we could move forward with this type of procedure, or is that a separate matter?
It would be separate.
Looks like it's a separate.
So, Ms. Garcia, can you define what that is? What is an urgent policy related matter? Where are we at?
Okay, so everybody, we're looking at the agenda for 6D. So where we're at right now is introduction, overview, and next steps. C would be the review of section A, which I think we know now we can't really break it down, but we all know on marching orders that the next section we're gonna look at is A. And then we can talk about D at this time if the board wants to move forward to D.
I just want a definition of it. What's it for? Who asked for it and? why is it
Good
there?
stuff.
Sure, Madam President, members of the board. I think it's important for us to have some discussion because we know that there are new policies that may conflict with current practice and that we need to address those to bring those into alignment quickly. And so as far as urgent, a definition, I don't have a particular definition in my head to give you, but we do anticipate that that is going to happen. And so we're going to have a time of sort of disequilibrium that the new policies that were adopted as a whole haven't yet been reviewed by staff and compared to current practice. So we need some time in there to make that happen. And this process does give us that, and it's going to take months. It's going to take some time. But in the meantime, where we find that there may be a policy related matter that needs to be adjusted quickly because it's in conflict with something that we value deeply, that's very important to us, we need to be able to go out of order to be able to address it. In addition, for policies that are not urgent, where we find that misalignment, I need to be very clear that as the person who's responsible for all of the operations of our school district, I need to be clear that there will be times that I will make a legal and reasonable decision that, in regards to this equilibrium between policies and current practice.
That answer your question?
Well, I'm actually gonna ask you to say that last sentence again. What was that? You're going to make a determination.
When necessary,
Uh,
I'll make a legal and reasonable decision when we have a discrepancy between policy and practice. So our policies are legal, right? So our first priority is we follow the law. Our second priority is we follow policy. Laws change, policies follow. So if we find a time that there's a discrepancy, I'll follow law first, and that would be my first obligation.
but you should have led with that.
Okay,
I would have made it a lot
Thank you.
more clear to me. Anyways,
What is the section that gives the superintendent that authority?
Yeah, well, that would be the page 154, where it allows the superintendent to make those choices and decisions.
I'll do that.
and Ms. Garcia, and as a recommendation. Always with the assumption that we're always going to try to get it to them as soon as possible to make that. And I'm a firm believer, just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's right. We have to follow the law, but we don't have to do everything I'm not saying we break the law, but just because something is legal for us to do doesn't mean we have to do it. But we should do it. We have to follow the rules if we're doing anything that pertains to it. But if I told you that it is legal for me to dance on those chairs, that doesn't mean I probably should, right? It's not going to affect the day-to-day operation. So I agree. Anything that's legal, we need to follow those to the letter. And obviously, you're going to let us know as soon as that decision process of yours takes place. So when I read this, my first inclination was that it had to deal with either significant impact on our operations, which is, I think, what you're talking about, and what he alluded to, that you have the ability to do something to keep us in the realms of the law, or a time frame matter like we did with a couple of policies ago that we have a deadline that we have to do in order to change a policy. So that's what I viewed that as. I just didn't understand what it was for and why it was here, because it's saying procedures for that. And obviously the procedure should be, if at all possible, since they are board policies, to bring those to the board. But if it's not possible, according to the policies that we adopted, you have that luxury of making the best decision that you can.
And I think for maybe a little further clarification, if Dr. Romero makes that decision, Dr. Alvin, if you make that decision, you would let us know immediately, probably at the next meeting. So we can ratify what you did with a revised, reviewed, amended policy. So my thought would be, unless somebody has a better idea, is that we keep on the agenda during our policy meetings, a line item under discussion regarding the policy manual, one section that says urgent policy related matters. And if something pops up at any time in the next 6 months, 8 months, a year, however long this takes us, then that's where she would bring forward that, understanding that this policy is posted, this agenda is posted, and any policies that she's going to be addressing would be posted and should be on the public webpage for the board to know what policy she's talking about, as well as the public and administrators to know what policy she's talking about. So that if we have it in front of us, everybody will know we're talking about that policy that day. That makes sense?
I wonder if an example would help.
Okay.
So we're talking in cabinet today, and one example was a couple years ago, our board passed policy that's in compliance with state law that around graduation requirements. So the state says that students can substitute marching band credits for physical education credits. So that's law. Our policy, our old policies have that in policy. Not sure if that's in the new policies. What we absolutely wouldn't do is if we found that it was not in our new policies, we would absolutely not change the graduation requirements for kids who are supposed to be graduating in 3 weeks and say, oh, no, you can't graduate. You didn't take PE, because that's what it's not in our new policies. So that's my example of reasonable and legal. So again, there may be those misalignments. We're going to find them as we go through, but we're going to make sure that we err on the side of being reasonable. So that's just an example. I hope that helps.
And I just wanted to reiterate that practices are not policies.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I've talked about everything under item 6. Is there any
There's a.
more discussion there? Or-
Yeah, Madam President, on the finance part, like it says, that new policy only has a limit of 2,500 and we passed that limit to 60,000. For purchasing and stuff like that. That needs to be adjusted. And also, there's another one, the catastrophic leave. That the new one only says certified to certified, support to support, where an catastrophic leave was any school employee can apply and donate time. So I think that needs to be changed because this is something that's important to the employees.
Okay, so related to that, so I have this timeline, I wrote section A. So it seems to me that you could add a section now that needs to be reviewed. And then, you know, we're not taking action, but it will be, we will be reviewing it. And then we will be taking action on June 6th, section A plus whatever that urgent policy is. So I do think that should be part of the mix, and it may happen almost every month that there's another one that we have to add. In addition to the current section we're working on. Just to say, stay sort of caught up and not let things sit.
And I think once we would approve it, adapt it or amend it or whatever we choose to do, it kind of takes it off our big list of things to do, because now we've already, even if it's just one section of that. One breakout of that section A, so it kind of moves us through that one section maybe a little faster, and that's, okay, so. I like that and I agree with that. Or also does.
See, one more thing.
Go ahead.
If you could just tell me, just write it down what that entails. To me, I would put something under this category if it met this criteria. You know, like to keep it legal or something like that. What I don't want to do is if we have a bar set for an urgent policy related matter, I don't want that thing to start slipping down and we're start talking about individual policies that don't meet the initial criteria of what we're talking here, just because we want to change that. So, something to that effect, I would appreciate. Thank you.
If you could send that to us. What that would
Oh,
look like.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think,
Just-
I think what. Mr. Smith, if you don't mind, I think we're just asking you basically to identify what you call urgent. And why you would need to call it urgent, so that we're not just putting in any policy just because that it meets a bar. And what you would consider that bar to be, is that correct?
Basically. Absolutely.
I will review my notes from all of you and try to incorporate something into that definition.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, who wants to be the leader of our policy committee?
Didn't I get fired?
No, sir, you did not.
Okay.
You got reassigned as a committee, but I need a board member to step up and be the board member that we can send our comments to.
So yeah, I'll do it. And again, I'll give you my word that you send me a comment, it will be in for our review. And that goes for the staff as well, and that goes for the community as well.
So that date timeframe that looking at this gives us, that means that all board members would need to have their suggestions to you no later than May 10th.
Correct. With the caveat that everybody understands that I'm out of town until the 16th, but I can check emails in the evenings and I will do my part and keep us on track.
So would your manner? Is that the best way to do it?
That's the only.
Okay, so
Sure.
So, okay, regarding that, on the May 10th on this timeline, board members provide feedback on survey link. Is there a survey link? Or should it say by mail to Mr.
We need to, you need to decide that and we'll go with the will of the board for that.
I think the survey link was more for the public, maybe administrators, I'm not sure. But I think as a board, if this is how we want to proceed, and it sounds like that's how Mr. Smith would like us to proceed, then any of our feedback goes directly to him through an email.
Okay.
Keeping in mind, though, that the dates are gonna change, obviously, because the public doesn't have access to this, and today's 3rd or 2nd. So if they don't have access till the 15th, we can't do this without that. So these dates will slide, just so everybody knows.
When will they? I mean. We have it. Can that just be put on the website?
My understanding,
Section
is the format that it's in, anything that goes on a website is highly regulated for accessibility. So if it's in a format that that's not compatible with the accessibility features, then we cannot legally put it on the website. And so that's where our hangup is.
So when will we have this available for the public?
I was assured as soon as possible. And that's not up to me, Mr. Vickers.
It's up to Mr. Kennedy.
I need
or-
to, I need to have it in the proper format to be able to have our communication staff put it up.
It's an electronic format that I don't even know necessarily that he personally does. He has someone at MSBA that can do that and needs to communicate with our guys.
That's my understanding.
Somebody, so if Brian over there asked for section A, we couldn't shoot him a PDF?
We could shoot a PDF by email, sure. But on the website, it has to be accessible compliant.
Okay, so when that happens, we can do that portion. I don't wanna hold back until we get to that point. If somebody wants it, not that you do, but if you did, I think you should be able to get it. So,
Right, I do understand the cabinet and are very busy. That can happen, so I understand that part. You don't want to burden them, put a bunch of stuff on. But yeah, we need to get.
And Dr. Elder, please let us know when that is available and what answer you got from Mr. Kennedy. So all of us be aware of any questions that you get. Please. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Mr. Smith, for taking on the role. I appreciate that. Items were for discussion only. No actions were needed or warranted at this time. Next, we are on item number 7, which is approval of a purchase. This was an item that was requested to be on our meeting today. Is a little bit of a rush matter. Dr. Elder, you want to go ahead and address this, or do you have someone doing it?
Yeah, Madam President, I'd like to call Chief Financial Officer Cindy Tracek to the podium to discuss item 7.
Madam President, members of the board, and Superintendent Dr. Elder. So we have the opportunity to purchase minibus. Another school had ordered a bus and that fell through for them. So one's available, and in the past, all of our other buses are large buses. And we have We have had some where we have clubs and they'll have like one person on the bus going, so we're hoping to get a smaller bus and one came available. So. It is like a smaller 24 passenger bus. And so all the other buses have been way more expensive.
Go ahead.
At this time, I would move to approve the purchase of the 2023 Chevy Microbird activity bus. With the production.
So it looks like I have a motion by Mr. Hidon and I got a second by Mr. Bennett. Any discussion, gentlemen? Yes.
It's just, yeah, it's just a smaller bus. It's not, it's gonna be like a white bus that we can. It could be out for activities, it could be for athletics. It doesn't have the bottom portion where they can put stuff, but there is room in the back. It is white, yes. So there's no.
No, it's perfect. I just wanted to know if we were gonna. That's fine.
And how does that compare? The other.
I believe it's about half the price of what we're looking, and I believe that buses, the next wave of buses are going up in price. So we thought it was a real good deal to get, actually. Mhm.
Any other discussion, gentlemen? Not hearing any other discussion, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Hidon, how do you vote? Sure. Mr. Bennett?
Yeah.
Mr. Vickers? Mr. Smith? And I too vote yes. Okay, so gentlemen, again, this is what our agenda is going to look like for this specific meeting, which is a policy meeting. Our next meeting would be on June 6th for policy. Is there any other items on the agenda for policy you want to talk about? Or any items for new business you want me to look at for our May 23rd meeting? There's still time for me to put items on that agenda.
Madam President, I'd like a result from Ms. Chavez's survey on the daycare. There was a survey sent out for daycare for employees district.
So we can have a presentation, Dr. Elder, from Mrs. Chavez on that survey, and she can give us more information about what the district is considering. Okay, anything else?
Ms. Garcia,
So
so
this is gonna be on the, I'm sorry, sir, this would be on our May 23rd meeting? Go ahead. So,
I would like an item on the agenda for discussion and possible action with the title of looking at the board president to open up the position for superintendent of Los Angeles Schools.
want that on the 23rd?
Correct?
So okay, do the board members want an executive session prior to that? We have to meet as a personnel matter, we have to meet in closed doors, or do you want me to just put the discussion on?
So I wouldn't be able to answer that because I don't know if we need an executive session or not. If they wanted to have a discussion, we could discuss it in an open session. But I'm just asking that we have the same thing on the agenda that we had the other day. And I don't think we had an executive session prior to that either, so. Correct.
Same.
Yes, please.
Request, then those will be items that I will add to the May 23rd agenda. Announcement of meetings. This brings us to the announcement of meetings as allowed by the Open Meetings Act and the District Open Meeting Resolution. On occasion of forum of the board members attend the same function, including those held at school sites, at district level, as well as sports functions and end-of-year activities and graduations. Board members will refrain from discussing and or acting on Las Vegas Board of Education issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. With that being said, I'd like to announce the following meetings. For sure, we know we're gonna have May 9th Finance Committee here at Central Office Boardroom at 3 p.m. There's been a request by the superintendent considering our special meeting for the approval of the budget. I'll ask Dr. Elder to give us information on the budget if we're ready to go on the 9th.
Madam President, members of the board, at this time, our finance department is still awaiting some forms and some finalization from the PED that will enable us to finalize our budget. We hesitate to rush that process, and knowing that we have a week and we still don't have all the forms that we need, we're a little bit nervous about continuing with the May 9th meeting. I'd like to propose that we add to the May 23rd meeting a meeting prior to, a special meeting prior to, devoted specifically to action approving the budget for 23-24 pending PED approval. A long night, but it'll give us enough time to have everything well prepared.
And Dr. Elder, are you thinking at what time would you like us to convene to look at consideration and action of the budget for 2023-2024?
I believe 4 o'clock would give us ample time.
Do I hear a definite no from anybody that they could not make themselves available at 4 p.m. on May 23rd?
We can't just roll it into the regular meeting. It will take too long.
I'll ask Dr. Elder. Dr. Elder, what do you think?
I think I'm going to actually defer to Chief Sandra Tracek. Do we have to have a separate budget meeting? It can be part of the regular agenda. Okay, thank you.
Looks like we
Yeah,
do it
there-
at 6.
There again, get a packet and advance. Good question. Answer.
All board members agree and they're happy with rolling it in at 6 o'clock. Any reason why that would work?
Ms. Garcia, it works fine. I just want to know, there's not a, what is the day that we don't get another day out? What's the absolute deadline that we have to?
June 7th.
June 7th? Okay, I know you want it done before that. You don't have. I know you want it done. I just wanted to know what that was.
So then we
That's why
will
we're
be
gonna
taking the May 9th meeting off of our announcement of meetings. That is gonna go away. There's not a budget meeting. It will be on the agenda for consideration on May 23rd, 2023 during our regular board meeting, Central Boardroom, 6 o'clock p.m. On May 30th and May 31st, the board superintendent will be having a retreat. We will be over at the UNM Valencia Workforce Training Center. This is on 1020 Union Ranch East Loop in Las Vegas. This is for discussion purposes only. No action will be taken in this retreat and a quorum will be in attendance. That will be from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on both days, May 30th and May 31st. This leads us to the adjournment of the meetings. Before I call for a motion to adjourn, I'll ask that if there's any signatures today, although I don't think that we approved anything, so there won't be any. Board members are free to leave at the adjournment of this meeting. I need a motion. Yes, sir.
What about those, what about the board meetings in Albuquerque first, second, and third? We need to announce those now.
We could probably announce those at the meeting that we're having on the 23rd. But I think they're talking about the conference that we have, the law conference. Is that it?
Correct.
Right.
Those
June
will be
1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Those will be on your next one.
Okay. So we'll announce them on our next agenda. All right, I need a motion to adjourn. And second by motion by Mr. Smith, the second by Mr. Bennett. Any discussion on adjournment? All right, Mr. Hidor. Mr. Bennett.
Yep.
Mr. Vickers. Yes. Mr. Smith. I vote yes. Meeting adjourned.